In the heart of a small Midwest town, where dreams often rust alongside old cars, an extraordinary test of character is about to unfold. Jake Miller's auto shop isn't much to look at, a weathered building with a leaky roof and second-hand tools. But it's where miracles happen on a shoestring budget. When a mud-covered pickup truck limps into his garage one rainy evening, Jake sees nothing but another honest day's work. He doesn't know that behind the wheel sits Alexandra Morrison, a billionaire CEO who's traded her tailored suits for worn jeans, searching America's back roads for something her wealth can't buy. Genuine human connection. What follows is not just a story about fixing engines, but about two souls from different worlds discovering that authenticity is the rarest currency of all. In a world obsessed with status and appearance, one mechanic's simple act of kindness is about to spark a chain of events that will challenge everything they both believe about worth, wealth, and what it truly means to be rich. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun filtered through the grimy windows of Miller's Auto Repair, casting long shadows across the oil-stained concrete floor. Jake Miller wiped the sweat from his forehead with a threadbare rag, leaving a fresh smudge of grease above. His earnest brown eyes, the ancient radio in the corner crackled with static between verses of Johnny Cash, providing a fitting soundtrack to another day of keeping old dreams alive. Mrs. Henderson's '98 Buick sat in the center bay, its worn paint matching the faded signs outside. Jake knew she couldn't afford much. Her social security checks barely covered her medications, but her car was her lifeline to independence. He'd been working on it for 2 hours already, charging for one. Some might call it bad business, but Jake called it being human. "Jake Miller, you're going to work yourself into the poorhouse," Sarah's voice cut through the radio static. His sister stood in the doorway, clipboard in hand, looking every bit the successful real estate agent she'd become. "These books are worse than last month." Jake slid out from under the Buick, sitting up slowly. "Good morning to you too, sis." He reached for his coffee, long since gone cold. "How's the fancy real estate business? Better than fixing cars for free?" Sarah's heels clicked against the concrete as she approached, waving a handful of overdue notices. "The bank called me. Again. They're not going to keep extending these loans forever." Jake's shoulders tensed, but he kept his voice light. "Dad always said, Dad's not here anymore, Jake." Sarah's voice softened. "And his way of doing business? It was beautiful, but it's not sustainable." Chambers Development made another offer on the property. Prime location, they said. You could pay off all the debt and have enough left to start fresh somewhere else. The memory of his father's calloused hands guiding his own over an engine block flashed through Jake's mind. The smell of motor oil and coffee, the sound of laughter mixing with the clinking of tools. "This place isn't just a business, Sarah. It's every Saturday morning Dad spent teaching me, instead of golfing with his buddies. It's every customer who trusts us with their vehicle because Dad built a reputation for honest work." A knock on the garage door interrupted them. Old Bill Thompson stood there, his ancient Ford pickup wheezing behind him. "Jake, son, she's making that noise again." Jake stood, wiping his hands. "Bring her in, Bill. I'll take a look." He turned to Sarah. "We'll figure something out. We always do." Sarah watched as Jake greeted Bill with a warm handshake, already focused on the sputtering engine. Her brother's worn boots, the patches on his overalls, the way he carefully stored his tools to make them last. Everything about him spoke of their father's legacy of integrity over profit. As she walked to her car, she passed the wall of photos. Near the office, 20 years of customers smiling next to their repaired vehicles, children who grew up to bring their own cars to Jake, holiday cards and thank you notes pinned between invoices. The real estate listing in her bag suddenly felt heavier. Jake's voice drifted out, patient and kind, as he explained to Bill exactly what the problem was and how they'd fix it. No upselling, No hidden fees, just honest work at a fair price. In the glossy world of profit margins and development deals, such simplicity was becoming extinct. The stack of unpaid bills on Jake's desk told one story, but the trust in Bill Thompson's eyes as he handed over his keys told another. Sarah slipped the real estate listing back into her bag. Some things, she knew, were worth more than money, even if the banks didn't see it that way. The 72nd floor of Morrison Technologies headquarters gleamed with polished marble and success. Alexandra Morrison stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, her reflection ghosting against the Chicago skyline. Her tailored charcoal suit and perfectly styled dark hair projected the image expected of a CEO, but her green eyes held a weariness that even the best PR team couldn't Photoshop away. "Miss Morrison?" Thomas Chen, her executive assistant, cleared his throat. "The board is waiting." Alexandra turned, squaring her shoulders. "Let me guess. Another lecture about public image and strategic partnerships?" Thomas's slight grimace confirmed her suspicion. "Mr. Peterson mentioned something about the Thompson merger and suitable companionship." Suitable companionship. Alexandra echoed, the words tasting bitter. At 32, she'd built Morrison Technologies into a global leader in sustainable energy, yet somehow the board still thought she needed a man to complete the picture of success. The boardroom fell, silent as she entered, 12 pairs of eyes watching her take her seat. Richard Peterson, head of the board, didn't waste time on pleasantries. "The Thompson merger is crucial for our Asian expansion, Alexandra. James Thompson has been asking about you specifically." "I'm aware of James's interest, Richard. I'm also aware of his 3 failed marriages and pending SEC investigation." Alexandra kept her voice level, professional. "The merger will succeed or fail on its own merits." "The public loves a power couple," Barbara Chen interjected, sliding a tablet across the table. "Your father understood the importance of image. The company's stock dropped 3 points after you were photographed eating alone at that diner last week." Alexandra glanced at the tabloid headline. "Morrison heiress, lonely at the top?" Below it, a grainy photo of her enjoying a quiet meal, apparently a corporate crisis in the making. "I need some time," she said finally, standing. "A few weeks to consider our options." Back in her office, Alexandra sank into her chair. Photos lined the walls, her father breaking ground on their first factory, her mother cutting ribbons at charity galas, Alexandra herself accepting awards and giving speeches. Success measured in carefully curated moments. "They're wrong, you know." Thomas set a cup of tea on her desk. "About all of it." Alexandra smiled weakly. "Are they? Dad always said true character shows in how you treat people when the cameras aren't watching. But in this world," she gestured at the skyline, "everything's a performance." Thomas watched as she pulled up an old photo on her computer, her father in overalls teaching teenage Alexandra to change a tire. "Remember when Dad used to say the best way to judge someone's character was to watch how they treated their car? And their wallet," Alexandra added softly. "He said you could tell everything about a person by how they handled other people's money and their own tools." A plan began forming in her mind. "Thomas, I need you to do something completely insane." Her assistant's eyes lit up. "Finally, what are we thinking? Hostile takeover? Secret investigation?" "Better." Alexandra pulled up a map. "I need you to help me disappear, just for a few weeks. No security, no entourage, no Morrison name." She pointed to a series of small towns. "Real places, real people. I need to see if Dad was right, if you can still find genuine character. In this world, the board will have a collective aneurysm." Thomas was already taking notes. "I love it. I'll need 48 hours to set up a secure cover identity. What's our story?" Alexandra looked at the old photo of her father again. "Make it simple. Someone passing through, maybe looking for a fresh start. And Thomas, find me the most reliable used truck you can, something that might need a little work along the way." As Thomas left to set the plan in motion, Alexandra watched the sunset paint the city in shades of gold. Somewhere out there, beyond the glass towers and corporate games, real people were living real lives. She just had to find them, and maybe in the process, find herself again. Millbrook, Indiana wasn't the kind of town that made it onto postcards. Its water tower, painted in fading blue, proclaimed home of the Fighting Falcons above Main Street, where Christmas lights stayed up year-round because nobody had the heart to take them down. The morning rush at Ruby's Diner consisted of exactly 3 pickup trucks and a handful of regulars who'd been claiming the same seat since the Reagan administration. "Order up for the usual suspects," Ruby's voice carried across the diner as Jake pushed through the door, bell jingling above him. The smell of coffee and hash browns filled the air, mixing with the familiar scent of motor oil that seemed to follow him everywhere. "You're late, Jake Miller," Ruby called out, sliding a plate of eggs and toast across the counter. "Frank's been talking my ear off about his transmission for 20 minutes. Frank Watson, retired postman and self-appointed town historian, waved from his corner booth. "Jake, tell Ruby I'm right about that clicking sound. It ain't normal, is it?" "Wouldn't be if it was a transmission, Frank." Jake settled onto his usual stool, accepting the coffee Ruby already had waiting. "But what you're hearing is your fan belt. Give me an hour this afternoon, I'll fix it for the price of one of Ruby's apple pies." "Speaking of payment," Ruby lowered, her voice sliding him an envelope. "Found this in the register this morning. It's from Mrs. Henderson." Jake opened it to find a handful of carefully counted bills and a note written in shaky handwriting. "For fixing Jimmy's bike too, don't argue." He smiled, remembering the little boy's face lighting up when he'd repaired his broken bicycle chain last week. Mrs. Henderson didn't have much, but she had pride. The diner's door chimed again, and Marcus Webb from the bank entered. His tie, too, tight for the early hour. Jake felt his stomach tighten. These days, the sight of anyone from Millbrook First National had that effect. "Jake," Marcus nodded, taking the stool next to him. "Got a minute?" Ruby suddenly became very interested in wiping down the already clean counter, staying within earshot. In Millbrook, everyone's business was everyone's business, especially when it came to the town's beloved mechanic. "Look," Marcus began, voice low, "I've pushed back as much as I can, but the regional office is breathing down my neck. Chambers Development has been asking questions about property values in the area. They see potential here." "Potential for what?" Jake's coffee turned bitter in his mouth. "Another strip mall? More empty promises about jobs that'll disappear when they find somewhere cheaper to build?" Marcus sighed. "Times are changing, Jake. Small towns like Millbrook either adapt or—" He left the sentence hanging. "Or they die," Jake finished. "This town's got more life in it than any developer could understand. Yesterday, I helped Tim Carroll get his tractor running so he could harvest before the rain. Last week, I kept Annie Miller's catering van going so she could make it to her biggest event of the year. That's not just business, Marcus. That's community." The banker stood, straightening his tie. "Community doesn't pay property taxes, Jake. You've got until the end of the month to show some serious change in your finances." He hesitated. "For what it's worth, I hope you figure something out. My dad still talks about how your father helped him when our family was struggling." As Marcus left, Ruby appeared with a fresh cup of coffee. "On the house, honey, and don't you worry about that banker. This town's got your back." Through the diner's window, Jake watched the morning traffic, if you could call it that, trickle down Main Street. Old Bill Thompson's truck rumbled past, and probably heading to the feed store. The high school bus wheezed up the hill, carrying kids who'd grown up bringing their bikes to his shop. A mud-covered pickup truck he didn't recognize turned the corner, moving slowly as if searching for something. "Stranger in town," Ruby noted, following his gaze. "Don't get many of those these days." Jake watched the truck disappear around the corner. "Maybe they're just passing through." "Maybe," Ruby smiled knowingly. "Or maybe they're exactly what this town needs right now." The morning sun caught the chrome trim of the passing vehicles, making them shine despite the dust and dents. In that light, even the tired old buildings of Main Street looked a little more alive, a little more full of possibility. Jake finished his coffee, left his usual tip, and headed back to the garage. Whatever changes were coming to Millbrook, he had work to do. One engine, one honest repair at a time. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Main Street when the first puff of steam escaped from under the hood of Alexandra's truck. She gripped the steering wheel tighter, watching the temperature gauge climb into the red. After 3 days on the road, sleeping in small motels and eating at local diners, she'd almost forgotten who she was supposed to be. Now, with her carefully chosen vehicle betraying her, reality came rushing back. The engine made a sound that even her limited mechanical knowledge recognized as bad. Very bad. She guided the truck to the side of the road, barely making it before it shuddered to a complete stop. Through the rising steam, she caught sight of a faded sign. Miller's Auto Repair, 14 Mile. Her phone buzzed, Thomas checking in. She ignored it, remembering her cover story. Alexandra Morrison might have a team of people to handle any crisis, but Alex Hayes, the identity Thomas had created, was just another traveler with a broken-down truck. 20 minutes later, Pete's Towing Service, a one-man operation run by a cheerful guy with a grey mustache and endless stories, was hauling her truck toward Miller's. "Jake'll fix you right up," Pete assured her. "Best mechanic in 3 counties. Honest as the day is long, just like his old man was." The garage looked exactly like the kind of place her father would have loved. Weathered but well-maintained, tools organized with obvious care, and a small office where character mattered more than chrome and glass. A tall figure emerged from under a lifted Chevy as they pulled in, wiping his hands on a red shop rag. "Got a live one for you, Jake?" Pete called out. "Lady's truck gave up the ghost right by the Murphy place." Jake Miller looked younger than Alexandra had expected, probably around her age, with kind eyes and the confident movements of someone who knew their craft inside and out. He approached the truck, already assessing the situation with a practiced eye. "Welcome to Miller's," he said, offering a hand that was clean despite his work-worn appearance. "I'm Jake." "Alex," she replied, taking his hand. His grip was firm, but gentle, calloused from honest work. "How bad is it?" Jake was already lifting the hood, expertly navigating through the lingering steam. "Let's find out. When did you first notice the temperature rising?" She described the symptoms, watching as he nodded thoughtfully. His focus reminded her of her father during his rare visits to the company's engineering department. The same intense concentration, the same respect for the machinery. "Good news is I can fix it," he said finally. "Bad news is it'll take a few days to get the parts. Head gasket's blown, and there might be some collateral damage we can't see yet." Alexandra felt a flutter of something that wasn't entirely disappointment. A few days in Millbrook hadn't been part of her plan, but how much are we talking about? Jake grabbed a notepad, breaking down the potential costs with transparent honesty. No padding, no unnecessary additions, just straightforward numbers. That would barely cover his time and materials. "I know it's not cheap," he added, "but I won't replace anything that doesn't need replacing. You have my word on that." In that moment, watching him sketch out a repair diagram to explain the process, Alexandra understood why her father had always insisted on getting his hands dirty, on knowing the people who actually did the work. There was something genuine here that no corporate boardroom could replicate. "I trust you," she said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. "Do what needs to be done." As Pete helped Jake push the truck into an empty bay, Alexandra pulled out her phone to find a local motel. Thomas would have a fit about the change in schedule, but for the first time in years, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. Morning light streamed through the garage's windows, catching dust motes that danced around Jake as he worked on Alexandra's truck. She sat on a cleaned-up workbench nearby, nursing a cup of coffee from Ruby's diner. Despite her attempts to blend in, there was something about the way she held the chipped mug that hinted at a life far removed from small-town garages. "So what brings you through Millbrook?" Jake asked, his voice slightly muffled as he leaned over the engine. Not exactly on the way to anywhere. Alexandra took a careful sip, buying time. Sometimes nowhere is exactly where you need to be. She watched his hands move confidently among the engine parts. My father used to work on cars. He said you could tell everything about a person by how they treated their tools. Jake straightened up, a genuine smile crossing his face. Your father sounds like a wise man. Mine used to say something similar. He picked up a worn wrench, turning it thoughtfully. This was his, not the fanciest, but it's never let me down. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Is that why you stayed? Alexandra asked softly. In Millbrook, I mean. Surely there were other opportunities. Jake's hands stilled for a moment. Opportunities to make more money. Sure, but this place, these people... He gestured to the wall of photos. Every face there has a story. Every car that comes in here isn't just a vehicle. It's someone's way to work, or their kid's ride to college, or an elderly person's connection to independence. Alexandra felt something tighten in her chest. In her world, value was measured in stock prices and market shares. Here, it was measured in trust and human connection. Besides, Jake continued, returning to work, who else would help Mrs. Henderson keep her car running? Or teach the Thompson kids about basic maintenance when they get their first cars? His voice carried a hint of pride mixed with concern, though honestly, these days it's getting harder to... He caught himself, shaking his head. Sorry, you probably don't want to hear about small-town economics. Actually, I do, Alexandra said, surprising herself with her honesty. Tell me more. For the next hour, as Jake worked, they talked about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up in the garage, learning at his father's side. She shared carefully edited stories about her own father, finding herself drawn to the genuine warmth in Jake's laughter. You know, he said, wiping his hands on a rag, most people get antsy watching their car being worked on. But you seem right at home here. Alexandra looked around the garage, at the organized chaos that spoke of years of dedicated service. Maybe because it feels more honest than where I came from. The truth of the words startled her. The sound of approaching footsteps made them both look up. Sarah stood in the doorway, files in hand, her expression shifting from businesslike to curious as she took in the scene. Jake, I need to... She stopped, looking between them. I'm sorry. I didn't realize you had company. Sarah, this is Alex, Jake introduced. Her truck's going to be with us for a few days. Alex, my sister. Sarah. Sarah's appraising look made Alexandra straighten instinctively, a boardroom reflex she quickly tried to suppress. Nice to meet you, she managed, hoping her discomfort wasn't obvious. Likewise, Sarah replied, her tone suggesting she was filing away every detail for later consideration. Jake, when you have a moment, we need to discuss those papers. Jake's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Later, Sarah. I promised Alex I'd have the preliminary work done by lunch. As Sarah left, Alexandra caught the concern in her backward glance. There was a story there, one that made her fingers itch to reach for her phone and ask Thomas to run a financial check on the garage. Instead, she forced herself to stay present, to be just Alex Hayes, watching a skilled mechanic work his magic on her truck. The Millbrook Inn wasn't the Ritz, something Alexandra found surprisingly refreshing. Her room had floral wallpaper that had seen better days and a window air conditioner that hummed like a contented cat, but the sheets were clean and the elderly. Owner Martha had the kind of genuine warmth that no five-star hotel could train into its staff. Parts won't be in until at least next Tuesday, Jake had told her, apologetic but direct. Supply chain issues. I could try rushing them, but no rush. Alexandra had interrupted, ignoring the dozen missed calls from Thomas on her phone. I think I could use a few days of small-town life. Now, 3 days later, she found herself perched on what had become her unofficial spot in Jake's garage, watching him teach a teenager named Danny about proper oil change procedures. She'd abandoned her designer jeans for a pair of overalls Jake had lent her, rolled up at the ankles and stained with honest work. "See, Danny, you always double-check the filter seal," Jake explained, his patience evident in every word. "One small oversight here could cost your engine down the line." "Like what happened to my brother's car?" Danny asked, eyes wide with recognition. Jake nodded, shooting Alexandra a knowing look. "Exactly. Sometimes the cheapest option ends up being the most expensive in the long run." The irony of a billionaire CEO learning basic auto maintenance wasn't lost on Alexandra. What would the board think if they could see her now, hands dirty, learning the difference between metric and standard wrenches? "You're getting pretty handy with those tools," Jake commented later, after Danny had left. "Sure you haven't done this before." Alexandra thought of her father's private garage, where he'd spent weekends tinkering with classic cars. "Let's just say I had a good teacher once. I've been away from it too long." The door chimed, and Ruby from the diner walked in with a paper bag that filled the garage with the smell of fresh pie. "Thought you two could use a break," she announced, setting up an impromptu picnic on Jake's workbench. "And maybe our visitor would like to hear about the town festival coming up this weekend." "Ruby," Jake warned, but his eyes crinkled with amusement. "What? Can't blame a town for trying to show off a little when we have company?" Ruby turned to Alexandra. "It's nothing fancy, just some local bands, games for the kids, Sarah's real estate booth trying to convince people Millbrook's the next big thing." "It's actually pretty special," Jake added, accepting a piece of pie. "Dad used to organize the classic car show portion. These days I just make sure everyone's cars are running well enough to get there." Alexandra watched the easy interaction between them. The way Ruby fussed over Jake's long hours, how Jake knew exactly how she took her coffee. This was what her father had tried to teach her. That business wasn't just about transactions, but about connections. "I could help," she found herself offering. "With the festival preparations, I mean. I'm pretty good with organization, and it seems like you've got your hands full here." Jake's surprise melted into a warm smile that made her heart skip. "You sure you're supposed to be on vacation or whatever this is?" "Maybe this is exactly what I need," she replied, meaning it more than she could admit. Later that evening, as Alexandra walked back to the inn, her phone buzzed again. Thomas, for the 20th time that day. This time she answered. "I was about to send a search party," he hissed. "The board is asking questions, and the Thompson merger needs to wait." Alexandra cut in, watching the sunset paint Millbrook's main street in shades of gold. Something more important came up. More important. "Then a billion-dollar deal?" Alexandra paused outside Martha's Inn, looking back toward the garage where a light still burned. Jake was probably still working, putting everyone else's needs before his own. "Maybe," she said softly. "I'll check in tomorrow, Thomas. And hey, could you look into something for me? Quietly? I need to know everything you can find about Chambers' development and their small-town acquisition patterns." She hung up before he could protest, then stood for a moment in the growing darkness. Somewhere in the distance, a screen door slammed. Children laughed and a dog barked, the simple symphony of small-town life that was beginning to feel more real than all the corporate presentations and power lunches she'd left behind. The next few days in Millbrook unfolded like pages from a forgotten storybook. Alexandra found herself swept into the rhythm of small-town life, each moment pulling her further from the world of corporate takeovers and shareholder meetings. Every morning started at Ruby's, where she'd learned that the booth by the window was unofficially reserved for Jake's breakfast, a tradition she now shared. "You're gonna love this," Jake said one morning, leading her down Main Street after their usual breakfast. Every Thursday the whole town comes alive for the farmers' market. The street had transformed overnight, with local vendors setting up stalls filled with fresh produce, homemade crafts, and the kind of genuine enthusiasm that no marketing team could manufacture. Old Bill Thompson waved from his honey stand, while Mrs. Henderson proudly displayed her prize-winning jams. "Jake Miller," a voice called out, "don't you dare walk past without trying my new apple butter." Wouldn't dream of it, Miss Clara. Jake grinned, steering Alexandra toward a booth decorated with mason jars. Alex, meet the best baker in 3 counties. Miss Clara, this is Alex. She's staying in town while I fix her truck. The elderly woman's eyes twinkled as she handed them each a sample. Staying, Good. This town could use some fresh faces, especially ones that make our Jake smile like that. Alexandra felt her cheeks warm, but before she could respond, a commotion down the street caught their attention. A young mother was struggling with a stroller, her toddler crying as one of the wheels stuck in a crack in the sidewalk. "Excuse me," Jake said, already moving to help. Alexandra watched as he knelt beside the stroller, producing a small tool from his pocket. Within minutes, the wheel was fixed, the toddler was giggling, and the mother was thanking him profusely. "He does that all day?" Miss Clara commented softly. "Just like his daddy did. Never asks for anything in return. Doesn't that make it hard to run a business?" Alexandra asked, thinking of profit margins and quarterly reports. Miss Clara's expression grew serious. "Harder these days than it used to be. Times are changing, and not everyone values the old ways anymore. But Jake, he understands that some things are worth more than money." Later that afternoon, back at the garage, Alexandra watched Jake work on her truck while simultaneously giving advice to a teenage girl about her first car. His patience seemed endless, his expertise freely given. "The trick is," he was saying, "to listen to your car. It'll tell you when something's wrong, long before it becomes a major problem." "Kind of like people," Alexandra found herself adding. "Sometimes you just need to pay attention to the signs." Jake looked up, their eyes meeting over the engine block. Something unspoken passed between them, a moment of understanding that made her heart race. The spell was broken by the rumble of an approaching tow truck. Pete was bringing in a minivan, a worried-looking family standing nearby. "Vacation emergency," Pete announced. "Thompson family from Ohio." They were headed to Lake Michigan when their transmission started acting up. Jake wiped his hands and approached. The family, parents, 3 kids, and a golden retriever, all looking thoroughly dejected. "Let's take a look. Where are you folks staying?" We haven't figured that out yet," Mr. Thompson admitted. "We were trying to make it to my sister's place, but now Martha at the inn has 2 connecting rooms available," Alexandra heard herself say. "I saw her posting the vacancy this morning, and Ruby's Diner does amazing kids' meals." She caught Jake's approving smile. An hour later, the Thompson family was settled at Ruby's, their dog happily munching on treats while Jake diagnosed their van. Alexandra had somehow become the unofficial town guide, drawing on her week of local knowledge to help the stranded family. "You're good at this, you know," Jake said quietly as they walked back to the garage. "Making people feel at home." "I had a good teacher," she replied, bumping his shoulder playfully. "Someone showed me how Millbrook welcomes strangers." The sunset painted the garage in warm hues as they returned to work, their comfortable silence broken only by the distant sound of children playing and the soft country music from Jake's old radio. For a moment, Alexandra could almost forget who she really was, almost believe she was just Alex Hayes, falling in love with a small town and its kind-hearted mechanic. But as her phone buzzed in her pocket, Thomas's name flashing on the screen, reality cast its shadow over her growing fairy tale. How long could she keep pretending? And when the truth came out, would any of this, the trust, the connection, the sense of belonging, survive? Sarah's heels echoed through the garage like a countdown. Jake looked up from the invoice he was preparing, already knowing from his sister's expression that this wasn't a social visit. Alexandra, working nearby on cataloging parts inventory, a system she'd offered to modernize, pretended to be absorbed in her task while acutely aware of the tension filling the room. "The bank called again," Sarah announced without preamble. "Marcus is out of extensions to offer Jake. They're talking. Foreclosure." Jake's hands stilled on the paperwork. "I just need a little more time. The festival's coming up, and with the tourist season..." "Tourist season?" Sarah's voice cracked with frustration. "In Millbrook. Jake, this isn't about seasonal fluctuations. The numbers don't lie. She spread several papers across the workbench. 3 months behind on the mortgage, 6 outstanding supplier bills, and Chambers Development keeps raising their offer. Alexandra's fingers tightened around the inventory clipboard. She'd seen the preliminary report Thomas had sent about Chambers, their pattern of buying small-town properties, promising development, then leaving communities with empty buildings and broken promises. "I'm not selling," Jake said firmly. "Dad built this place with his own hands. Every tool, every repair, every customer relationship. It's more than just property. It's also more than just memories," Sarah countered, softening. "Jake, I love this place too, but loving something doesn't always mean holding on to it until it breaks." The sound of approaching footsteps interrupted them. Mrs. Henderson appeared in the doorway, clutching her car keys nervously. "Jake, that noise is back. I know it's not your regular hours, but—" Jake was already moving toward the door. "Let's take a look, Mrs. Henderson. Sarah, we'll finish this later." As Jake led Mrs. Henderson to her car, Sarah turned to Alexandra with an appraising look. "You've been here almost 2 weeks now. That's a long time for a simple car repair." Alexandra met her gaze steadily, despite her racing heart. "Good work takes time. So does getting to know someone," Sarah replied pointedly. "My brother's a good man. The best I know. He deserves honesty from the people around him." The words hit Alexandra like a physical blow. Outside, she could hear Jake patiently explaining something to Mrs. Henderson, his voice carrying the same genuine care he showed everyone who walked through his doors. Sarah gathered her papers, pausing at the door. "Just whatever this is, whatever you're doing here, don't let him get hurt. He's got enough on his plate." After Sarah left, Alexandra slipped into the office, pulling out her phone. Thomas answered on the first ring. "I was just about to call," he said. "The board's getting restless. Thompson's people are pushing for an answer about the merger, and there are rumors about a possible hostile takeover if—" "What have you found?" "About Chambers," Alexandra cut in, watching through the window as Jake worked on Mrs. Henderson's car. "Standard corporate raiders," Thomas reported. "They target financially distressed properties in small towns, especially those with historical or community value. Buy low, flip quick, maximum profit. They've done it in 12 towns across 3 states in the past year alone." Alexandra's mind raced. With her resources, she could solve Jake's problems with a single phone call. Buy the garage, clear the debt, ensure its survival. But then what? Would any genuine connection survive once he learned who she really was? The sound of Mrs. Henderson's car starting successfully drifted through the window, followed by the elderly woman's delighted thanks. Jake was refusing payment again. Alexandra could see him shaking his head, that gentle smile on his face. "Thomas," she said slowly, "I need you to do something. The Morrison Foundation's small business grant program, is it still active?" "Technically, yes, but the deadline for applications was—" "Make it active, and find me everything you can about successful small-town automotive businesses, sustainable models, community integration programs, everything." "Alexandra," Thomas's voice carried a warning, "the board is already questioning your absence. If they find out you're personally involving yourself in some small-town garage, then they won't find out," she said firmly. "Not yet. And Thomas, thank you for understanding." She ended the call just as Jake walked back in, his face troubled despite the successful repair. Mrs. Henderson's unpaid bill would join the growing stack in his desk drawer, Alexandra knew. A drawer that was filling up with kindness, but emptying of hope. "You okay?" she asked softly. Jake looked at her, and for a moment she saw everything: his determination, his fear, his unwavering commitment to his father's legacy. "I will be," he said. "Always am." But as the afternoon sun cast shadows across the garage floor, Alexandra wondered how many more blows this good man could take before something had to give. And when it did, would she be part of his salvation, or just another name on the list of those who'd let him down? The setting sun painted the garage in shades of amber as Alexandra helped Jake close up for the day. She'd spent the afternoon learning to change brake pads, and despite the grease under her nails, or maybe because of it, she felt more herself than she had in years. "You're a natural," Jake said, watching her methodically clean and replace his tools. "Most people don't get the importance of proper tool care their first week." "My father was particular about his tools," she replied, the truth comfortable on her tongue. "He said they were like relationships. Treat them with respect, and they'll never let you down." Jake leaned against the workbench, something soft in his expression. "Your father sounds more like a philosopher than a mechanic." "He was both," Alexandra said, then quickly added, "in his own way. He tried to teach me, but I got caught up in other things." The radio played quietly in the background, an old country song about second chances and finding home. Jake moved closer, taking the wrench from her hands and placing it carefully in its designated spot. "Sometimes," he said, his voice low, "other things lead us exactly where we need to be." Their fingers brushed, and Alexandra felt the familiar spark that had been growing stronger each day. Jake's hands were rough from work, but gentle in their movements, much like the man himself. "Tell me about him," Jake said, as they sat on the tailgate of her truck, sharing the last of Ruby's coffee. "Your father. What else did he teach you?" Alexandra looked up at the emerging stars, choosing her words carefully. "He believed in building things that last. Not just machines, but trust. Relationships, community." She gestured at the garage around them. "Like what you have here." "Had," Jake corrected quietly. "Maybe. Things aren't looking great if you haven't noticed." "I've noticed," she said, fighting the urge to tell him about her plans, about the foundation grants she'd spent the morning, secretly restructuring with Thomas. "But I've also noticed how many people in this town depend on you. That has to be worth something. Worth doesn't always pay the bills." He sighed, but there was a half-smile playing at his lips. "Though try telling that to Mrs. Henderson. She brought by another pie today, insisting it was payment for fixing her grandson's bike. The chocolate one in the office. I was wondering about that." "Split it with me?" Jake offered. "I mean, technically, you helped earn it. You did hand me tools while I worked on the bike." They sat in comfortable silence, sharing pies straight from the tin like kids. A streak of chocolate at the corner of Jake's mouth made Alexandra laugh, and without thinking, she reached up to wipe it away. His skin was warm under her thumb, and for a moment neither of them moved. "Alex," Jake started, his voice rough with something unspoken. A car horn blared on Main Street, shattering the moment. They pulled apart as Sarah's voice carried across the parking lot. "Jake, you still here? The festival committee needs to—" She stopped short, taking in the scene before her. "Oh, I didn't realize—" "Just finishing up," Jake said quickly, standing. "Alex was helping me inventory the new parts delivery." Sarah's raised eyebrows spoke volumes. "Right. Well, the committee's having an emergency meeting at Ruby's. The band cancelled, and we need to figure something out before Saturday. I might know someone," Alexandra found herself saying. "A local group from my last stop in Ohio. They were looking for gigs." The lie felt bitter, even as she mentally drafted an email to Thomas about finding appropriate entertainment. "Really?" Sarah's skepticism was clear. "And they'd come to Millbrook?" "For the right price," Alexandra assured her, already calculating how to funnel the payment through untraceable channels. "I could make some calls." Later, after Sarah had dragged Jake off to the meeting, Alexandra stood alone in the garage. Her hand found the wrench she'd been using earlier, feeling its solid weight. Everything in this place was real. The tools, the work, the relationships, everything except her. Her phone buzzed with a message from Thomas. "Grant program restructured. Ready when you are. But board meeting scheduled for next week. They want you back." Alexandra looked at the half-eaten pie, at the spot where she'd almost kissed Jake Miller, the most genuine man she'd ever met. The irony of finding something real through a lie wasn't lost on her. The question was, how much longer could she maintain this delicate balance before everything came crashing down? Ruby's diner hummed with morning gossip as Alexandra sipped her coffee, trying to ignore the whispers that seemed to follow her these days. 2 weeks in a small town was long enough for people to start asking questions, and Millbrook's residents had plenty. "I heard she's a food critic," one elderly patron whispered too loudly to another. "Writing one of those fancy travel blogs about small-town America." "Nonsense," her companion replied. "Did you see how she handled that inventory system at Jake's? My money's on corporate consultant, probably here to help save the garage. If only they knew how close that last guess came to the truth." Alexandra buried her face in her coffee cup as the bell above the door chimed. Jake walked in, and the whispers shifted to knowing looks and poorly hidden smiles. "Your usual?" Ruby called out, already pulling a mug for him. "Thanks, Ruby." Jake slid onto the stool next to Alexandra, their shoulders brushing. "Morning, stranger. Heard an interesting rumor about you today." Alexandra's heart skipped. "Oh? Apparently," he said, eyes twinkling. "You're an undercover princess running away from an arranged marriage in Europe." She laughed, relief mixing with genuine amusement. "Well, that's a new one. Yesterday I was a secret restaurant reviewer." "Small towns," Jake shrugged, accepting his coffee from Ruby. "People like their stories. Though I have to admit, you're giving them plenty to work with." "How so?" "Well, let's see." He started counting on his fingers. "You show up out of nowhere in a truck that needs just enough work to keep you here. You know more about business operations than most MBAs. You've got connections to mysterious bands willing to play small-town festivals, and—" He paused, his voice softening. "You handle a wrench like someone who grew up around cars but haven't had to use one in a long time." Alexandra felt her smile fade. There was too much perception in his observations, too much truth hidden in the speculation. "Jake, Order up," Ruby interrupted, sliding plates in front of them. "Jake, honey, Marcus from the bank was looking for you earlier. Something about paperwork for the festival permits." Jake's expression darkened slightly. "Right, the permits." He turned to Alexandra. "Want to come with me to the bank? Could use a second set of eyes on these forms." She knew she should say no. Getting involved in the garage's financial dealings while maintaining her cover was dangerous. But the hope in Jake's eyes made refusal impossible. "Sure, let me grab my bag from the inn." Outside Martha's Inn, Alexandra quite literally ran into Sarah, who was putting up festival posters. "Oh, sorry, I was just—" Alexandra stopped at the look on Sarah's face. "Interesting thing," Sarah said, holding up her phone. "I was looking into that band you mentioned. Funny how their social media shows them booked in California this weekend." Alexandra's mind raced. "There must be some confusion. I meant, you know what else is interesting?" Sarah continued. "How you handle those business spreadsheets at the garage, almost like someone who's used to dealing with much bigger numbers." She stepped closer. "Who are you really, Alex? And what do you want with my brother?" Before Alexandra could respond, Jake's voice called out from across the street. "Everything okay over there?" "Fine," Alexandra called back, her voice steadier. Then she felt. She turned back to Sarah. "I know how this looks, but please, just give me a little more time. I promise I'm not here to hurt anyone, especially not Jake." Sarah studied her for a long moment. "You might not mean to," she said finally, "but secrets have a way of doing damage all on their own." As they walked to the bank, Jake chatting about festival plans, Alexandra felt the weight of her deception growing heavier. Her phone buzzed. Another message from Thomas about the board meeting, about Thompson's merger proposal, about her entire other life threatening to collide with this one. Inside the bank, Marcus greeted them with poorly concealed concern. As Jake went through the permit paperwork, Alexandra noticed the foreclosure notices poorly hidden under other documents on Marcus's desk. The numbers visible made her stomach clench. The garage was in worse shape than she'd thought. Jake caught her looking and quickly shifted position to block her view. "Just temporary setbacks," he whispered. "Nothing to worry about." But there was plenty to worry about. In trying to protect him, to help him without revealing her identity, had she only made things more complicated? The truth would come out eventually, It always did. And in a town this small, secrets had nowhere to hide. The festival preparations had transformed Main Street into a maze of half-built booths and twinkling lights. Alexandra sat on the steps of Miller's Auto Repair, watching Jake help the Thompson kids hang banners across the street. Her phone lay heavy in her pocket, Thomas's latest message still unanswered. Board meeting moved up 48 hours. Thompson lawyers preparing hostile takeover papers. Penny for your thoughts? Jake's voice pulled her back to the present. He sat beside her close enough that she could feel the warmth of his shoulder against hers. Just thinking about choices, she said softly. How one decision can change everything. Sounds serious. He bumped her shoulder playfully. Having second thoughts about staying in our little town. The question hit closer to home than he could know. Actually, I'm having second thoughts about leaving. Jake's breath caught slightly, and he turned to face her. You know, there's always room for a good mechanic in Millbrook, especially one who can make sense of business spreadsheets. Jake, she started, her heart racing. I mean it, he continued, his voice earnest. I've seen how you are with the customers, how you understand both the mechanical and human side of things. The garage could use someone like you. I could use... He trailed off, running a hand through his hair. Before she could respond, Sarah's voice cut through the evening air. Jake! Emergency at the festival grounds. The electrical setup for the stage isn't up to code. Jake stood reluctantly. I should go, Alexandra smiled. Save the festival. We can talk later. As Jake jogged across the street, Alexandra pulled out her phone and dialed Thomas. Finally, he answered. Alexandra, it's chaos here. Thompson's people are pushing for an immediate board vote on the hostile takeover. They're saying your absence proves you're not fit to lead. The stock is already responding to the rumors. She watched Jake disappear around the corner, her decision crystallizing. What if we beat them to it? What do you mean? A preemptive move. Something big enough to show we're still innovating, still growing. Something that proves we haven't lost touch with real people. Thomas was quiet for a moment. You're thinking about the small-town initiative we discussed. But Alexandra, that was theoretical. We don't have time to... We have 48 hours, she cut in. And I'm looking at the perfect pilot program right now. She stood, pacing the garage floor. Small-town automotive services, community integration, sustainable business practices, everything we talked about, but real, tested, proven. Miller's garage, Thomas said slowly. You want to use it as the model. Not use it. Partner with it. Invest in it. Show that Morrison Technologies isn't just about big cities and bigger profits. We start here, expand to other small towns, create a network of honest, community-focused businesses. The board will want numbers. Then get me numbers. Project analyses, community impact studies, everything. I need it before... The sound of footsteps made her turn. Jake stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. How long had he been there? I have to go, she said quickly, ending the call. Who's Morrison Technologies? Jake asked quietly. Alexandra's. Hart stopped. Jake, I can explain. Are you here to buy the garage? Is that what this all was? His voice cracked slightly. Some kind of corporate research project? No! I mean, not at first. I never meant to... To what? Lie. Pretend to be something you're not. The hurt in his eyes was worse than anger would have been. All those conversations about honest work, about my father's legacy, was any of it real? All of it was real. She stepped toward him. Everything I felt, everything we shared, we. Jake laughed bitterly. I don't even know who you are. The truth burst from her like a dam breaking. I'm Alexandra Morrison, CEO of Morrison Technologies. But that's not all I am. The girl who learned about cars from her father, who loves the honesty of mechanical work, who's falling in love with this town and with the... Don't. Jake held up a hand. Just don't. He turned away, his shoulders rigid. I think you should go. Your truck's been ready for days anyway. Jake, please, let me explain my plan. I want to help to invest in the garage, to save the small-town charity case." His voice was cold. "Thanks, but I've had enough of corporate saviors making promises. I trusted you, Alex, or whatever your name is. That's worth more than any investment you could offer." He walked out, leaving Alexandra alone in the garage that had begun to feel like home. Through the window, she could see the festival. Lights being tested, twinkling like stars over a main street that suddenly felt as foreign as any corporate boardroom. News travels fast in small towns, but the truth about Alexandra Morrison moved at lightning speed through Millbrook. By sunrise, Ruby's diner was buzzing with a strange mix of excitement and betrayal. The mysterious stranger who'd become part of their community wasn't just another traveler. She was one of the richest women in America. "I knew something was off," Ruby said, refilling coffee cups as her regular customers dissected every interaction they'd had with Alexandra. "Nobody orders expensive coffee in a place like this and then seems so happy with my regular brew." The morning paper lay on the counter, hastily printed by the local Gazette. The headline read, "Billionaire in Disguise, Morrison Technologies CEO found in Millbrook." Below it was a photo of Alexandra in her corporate attire, looking nothing like the woman in borrowed overalls who'd been helping at Jake's garage. Sarah sat alone in her usual booth, the untouched newspaper before her, watching her brother through the diner's window as he mechanically opened the garage for another day. She'd been right about their mysterious visitor, but the victory felt hollow. "He hasn't said a word since last night," she told Marcus when the banker stopped by her table. "Just worked through the night on Mrs. Henderson's car. The timing's awful," Marcus replied quietly. "The bank's deadline is tomorrow, and Chambers Development is pressuring the regional office for an answer." Outside, Alexandra's truck still sat in the garage's lot, now looking less like a breakdown and more like a carefully chosen prop. The town's reaction was split between those who felt deceived and those who saw opportunity. "Think about it, Bill," Thompson argued at the counter. "A billionaire chose our town, chose Jake's garage. That has to mean something." "Means she was studying us like specimens in a lab," Frank countered. "Probably laughing at us simple folk the whole time." The bell above the door chimed, and the diner fell silent as Alexandra herself walked in. She looked different now, not quite the corporate CEO from the newspaper photo, but no longer the casual mechanic's helper either. She carried herself with a quiet dignity that seemed to acknowledge both worlds. "Ruby," she said softly, "could I get some coffee? To go?" Ruby hesitated only a moment before reaching for a cup. $2. "I know you all have questions," Alexandra addressed the silent diner, "and you deserve answers. Yes, I'm Alexandra Morrison. Yes, I run Morrison Technologies. But everything else, every conversation, every moment spent here, that was real." "Real," Frank scoffed. "Like how you really needed your truck fixed?" "The truck broke down by chance," she replied. "Staying here, that was a choice. One of the best I've ever made." Sarah stood suddenly. "Did you ever think about what your little social experiment would do to people? To Jake?" Alexandra's composure cracked slightly at Jake's name. "It wasn't an experiment. I came looking for something genuine in a world of corporate facades. I found it here, in all of you, in him." She turned to Sarah. "I have a proposal for the garage, a legitimate business partnership that could save it and help other small towns too. But he won't see me. Can you blame him?" Sarah asked, but her tone had softened slightly. The diner's door opened again, and Thomas rushed in, looking out of place in his designer suit. "Alexandra, we have to go. The board's calling an emergency session." Alexandra took her coffee from Ruby, leaving a $100 bill on the counter. "Keep the change. We don't need your charity," Ruby said firmly, pushing the bill back. "No," Alexandra agreed, taking one last look around the diner that had become her morning sanctuary. "What you have here is worth far more than money. I just wish I'd figured that out before I lost everything that really mattered." As she walked out with Thomas, The diner erupted in conversation, but through the window, they all watched her pause. On the sidewalk, looking toward the garage where Jake's silhouette was visible through the open bay doors, still working, still trying to keep his father's dream alive for one more day. Jake's wrench slipped for the third time that morning, his usually steady hands betraying him. The radio, which had played country love songs during their shared moments in the garage, now sat silent. Every tool, every corner of the space seemed to echo with memories of Alex. No, Alexandra Morrison. The newspaper Sarah had left lay crumpled in his trash can, but he could still see the headline in his mind. The woman in the photo looked like a stranger, poised and polished in her corporate world, yet her eyes were the same ones that had lit up when she correctly diagnosed a timing belt issue last week. "You going to hide in here all day?" Sarah's voice startled him from his thoughts. "I'm working," he replied, though they both knew he'd been staring at the same bolt for 10 minutes. "She's still in town," Sarah said carefully. "The business news is saying Morrison Technologies is about to make some big announcement, something about small-town investment initiatives." Jake's jaw tightened. "Good for them, Jake." Sarah settled onto the workbench. "I know you're hurt, but I was at Ruby's this morning when she came in. The way she looked at the garage, at this town, that wasn't corporate calculation. No." Jake finally turned to face his sister. "Then what was it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like I was just part of some billionaire's reality. Tourism. Let's see how the simple folk live. Is that really what you think, that everything between you was fake? The memory of Alexandra's hands carefully cleaning his father's old tools, the way she'd listened to his stories, her genuine joy at helping Mrs. Henderson. It all felt real. That was the worst part. "It doesn't matter what I think," he said. "Finally, this garage, Dad's legacy, it's all about to be sold to the highest bidder anyway. Chambers Development wins. The American dream dies. Simple as that." Sarah watched her brother, seeing the weight of defeat in his shoulders. Maybe there's another way. Her way. Taking charity from Morrison Technologies? Becoming a corporate success story they can put in their annual report. Jake shook his head. "Dad built this place on honest work and trust." "And what exactly do you think she was doing here?" Sarah surprised herself by defending Alexandra. "From what I saw, she was learning our business from the ground up, working with her hands, understanding what makes a place like this special." Before Jake could respond, Danny burst into the garage, out of breath. "Jake, you need to see this." He thrust his phone forward, showing a live business news feed. Alexandra stood at a podium, looking both powerful and somehow vulnerable in her corporate attire. "Morrison Technologies has lost its way," she was saying. "We've forgotten that real innovation, real value, comes from understanding the heart of America. Places like Millbrook, Indiana, where honest work and community spirit aren't just slogans, they're a way of life." Jake found himself moving closer to the screen. "That's why today I'm announcing the Morrison Community Partnership Initiative. Not a takeover program, but a true partnership with small-town businesses. Starting with a family-owned garage that taught me more about genuine value in 2 weeks than I learned in 15 years of corporate boardrooms." The phone slipped from Danny's hand as Marcus from the bank rushed in. "Jake, you need to see these. Partnership proposal documents. I've never seen anything like it. Full autonomy, debt clearance, expansion support, but the garage stays yours. Completely." Jake barely heard him, his eyes fixed on Alexandra's image as she continued speaking. She was risking everything, her position, her company's direction, her entire corporate world, not to buy his garage, but to protect what it represented. The question was, could he trust her again? And more importantly, could he trust himself? To believe in something that seemed too good to be true one more time. The festival grounds had become a battlefield of competing visions for Millbrook's future. On one side, Chambers Development had set up an elaborate display of architectural renderings, gleaming strip malls and parking lots where historic buildings now stood. On the other, Alexandra's hastily assembled presentation showed a different path: restored storefronts, modernized but preserved, with Miller's Auto Repair as the centerpiece of a revitalized Main Street. Jake stood between them, the weight of the entire town's future seemingly resting on his shoulders. The bank's deadline was hours away, and two very different contracts lay on his desk back at the garage. "It's a generous offer," Marcus said, reviewing Chambers' paperwork. "More than generous, really. They're offering 3 times market value." "And Morrison Technologies?" Jake asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Their partnership proposal, it's unlike anything I've seen. Full debt clearance, renovation funds, complete operational autonomy, plus a commitment to use the garage as a training center for other small-town mechanics." Marcus shook his head in amazement. "They're not trying to buy you out, Jake. They're trying to build you up." The festival committee buzzed around them, hanging lights and setting up booths. Mrs. Henderson was arranging her prize-winning pies, while Bill Thompson tested the sound system. Everyone was pretending this was just another town celebration, but the tension was palpable. "Jake!" Sarah's voice cut through his thoughts. She was running toward him, waving a tablet. "You need to see this. Morrison Technologies' stock is plummeting. The board is calling for Alexandra's resignation over her small-town initiative." Jake's heart clenched. "What?" "She's risking everything," Sarah continued. "Her position, her company, her entire empire. All because she believes in places like Millbrook, in people like you." Before Jake could respond, a sleek corporate car pulled up to the festival grounds. Thomas emerged, looking harried, followed by Alexandra. She was back in CEO mode, but Jake caught the slight tremor in her hands as she checked her phone. "The board votes in 1 hour," he overheard Thomas saying. "Thompson's lawyers are ready to move. Without the garage contract signed as proof of concept, the whole initiative falls apart." Alexandra squared her shoulders. "Then we keep fighting. My father built this company by believing in people, not just profits. I won't let them—" "Alexandra Morrison!" A sharp voice cut through the crowd. Everyone turned to see Mrs. Henderson, marching toward them, pie in hand. The elderly woman stopped directly in front of Alexandra, who seemed to brace herself for condemnation. Instead, Mrs. Henderson thrust the pie forward. "You forgot your payment for fixing my grandson's bike last week." Alexandra blinked. "Mrs. Henderson, You worked on that bike same as Jake did, used your hands, got dirty, didn't ask for anything in return." The old woman's voice carried across the suddenly silent festival grounds. "Don't matter what name you used or what clothes you wear. Good heart's a good heart." One by one, other townspeople stepped forward. Bill Thompson talked about how Alexandra had helped him understand his truck's maintenance schedule. Ruby mentioned the genuine way she'd connected with customers at the diner. Even Frank, the eternal skeptic, grudgingly admitted she knew her way around an engine. Jake watched as Alexandra accepted each testimony with growing emotion, her corporate facade cracking to reveal the woman he'd fallen in love with, the one who could move between both worlds while keeping her soul intact. "The contract," he said suddenly, loudly enough to draw everyone's attention. "Where is it?" Thomas rushed forward with papers, but Alexandra held up her hand. "Jake, wait. Before you sign anything, you need to know everything. The board might still vote against this. I might not even be CEO by sunset. I'm risking your father's legacy on my fight, and that's not fair to—" "Where's the contract?" Jake repeated more firmly this time. Sarah appeared with the Morrison Technologies proposal, her eyes shining. Jake took it, pulled out his father's old pen, the one he used for all important garage documents, and looked directly at Alexandra. "You're wrong," he said, "about one thing. You're not risking my father's legacy." He stepped closer, close, enough to see the hope warring with fear in her eyes. "You're helping me protect it, the right way, the honest way." The scratch of Jake's pen on paper seemed to echo across the festival grounds. Alexandra held her breath as he signed his name, not with a flourish, but with the same steady, deliberate movement he used when working on engines. In that signature, Lay both trust and challenge, trust in her vision, and a challenge to prove worthy of it. There, he said, looking up at her. Ball's in your court now, Miss Morrison. Alexandra took the contract with trembling hands. Jake, Miss Morrison, Thomas interrupted, phone pressed to his ear. The board's demanding you appear in person. They won't accept a video call. Thompson's lawyers are already there. The crowd that had gathered around them shifted anxiously. The future of their town, of Jake's garage, now hung on Alexandra's ability to convince a room full of corporate sharks that small-town values weren't just quaint nostalgia. Go, Jake said, softly. Fight for what you believe in. I just did. Alexandra looked at the contract in her hands, then at the faces around her. Mrs. Henderson, Ruby, Bill Thompson, all the people who'd become more than just subjects in a social experiment. Finally, her eyes met Jake's. Come with me, she said. What? Come with me to the board meeting. She turned to Thomas. How long until the corporate jet can be ready? 20 minutes at the local airfield, Thomas replied, already dialing. Alexandra, Jake protested, I'm not exactly dressed for a corporate boardroom. He gestured at his work clothes, the ever-present grease stains telling the story of his day's labor. Exactly, she smiled. You're perfect just as you are. They need to see what real value looks like. Sarah stepped forward, holding up Jake's jacket. Go, she said. I'll handle things here. Besides, she grinned, someone needs to make sure those Chambers development vultures don't try anything while you're gone. The next hour passed in a blur. Jake found himself on the most luxurious private jet he'd ever seen, watching farmland give way to Chicago's skyline. Alexandra spent the time briefing him on the board members, her voice growing more CEO-like with each passing minute. But her hand found his during the landing, seeking strength. Ready? She asked as they stood outside the Morrison Technologies boardroom. Jake looked down at his hands. Clean now, but with the ingrained traces of honest work that no amount of scrubbing could remove. You know, my dad always said that the truth has a way of being enough as long as you believe in it yourself. Alexandra squeezed his hand one last time before pushing open the doors. The boardroom fell silent as they entered. Alexandra in her power suit, Jake in his work clothes, both standing tall. What is the meaning of this? Richard Peterson demanded, rising from his chair. This is a board meeting, not a mechanics convention. This, Alexandra said firmly, placing the signed contract on the table, is the future of Morrison Technologies. And this man, she gestured to Jake, is the proof that we haven't lost our way. We've found it. The stock is down 15 points. Barbara Chen interjected. Thompson offers us nothing but more of the same, Alexandra cut in. More mergers, more corporate raiders, more empty profits. But Jake Miller and his garage represent something else, something real. Jake stepped forward, his natural dignity silencing the whispers around the table. My father taught me that tools are only as good as the hands that hold them, and trust is only as strong as the people who keep it. Your company wants to talk about value? Let me show you what that really means. For the next 30 minutes, Jake talked about community, about genuine service, about the kind of business practices that couldn't be measured in quarterly reports, but built legacies that lasted generations. He spoke of Alexandra's vision not as corporate strategy, but as a return to fundamental human values. When he finished, the boardroom was silent. Thompson's lawyers exchanged uncomfortable glances. Richard Peterson studied the contract with new interest. It's your choice, Alexandra addressed the board. We can be another soulless corporation, or we can be something revolutionary, a company that makes profit by creating genuine value, by believing in places like Millbrook and people like Jake Miller. She stood straight, every inch the CEO, but her voice carried the warmth Jake had first heard in his garage. I'm not asking you to choose between profit and purpose. I'm showing you how to have both. The question is, are you brave enough to believe in something real? The Millbrook Town Festival was in full swing by the time Jake and Alexandra's car pulled up to Main Street. Fairy lights twinkled against the dusk sky, and the smell of Mrs. Henderson's pies mingled with the sound of local musicians playing from the temporary stage. The entire town seemed to be holding its breath, waiting to learn their fate. Sarah spotted them first, rushing forward with Ruby and Marcus close behind. One look at Alexandra's face told them everything they needed to know. The board voted in our favor, Alexandra announced, her voice carrying across the crowd that had quickly gathered. Not just for Miller's Garage, but for the entire Community Partnership Initiative. Chambers Development's offer has been officially rejected. A cheer went up from the townspeople, but Jake noticed Alexandra wasn't finished. She reached for his hand, squeezing it gently before continuing. But that's not all. The board was so impressed by Jake's presentation that they've approved an expanded version of our original plan. We're not just saving one garage, we're creating a network of community-focused businesses with Miller's Auto Repair as the flagship training center for the entire Midwest region. Marcus stepped forward, banking papers in hand. The loan's been officially transferred and cleared. The garage is secure, Jake. And with the new partnership structure, we're looking at expansion possibilities that could bring jobs back to 3 neighboring counties. Jake stood there, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the change his signature had set in motion. But before he could respond, a familiar voice cut through the celebration. "Jake Miller!" Mrs. Henderson called out, making her way through the crowd. "Your father would be so proud today, not just because you saved his garage, but because you did it the right way, by believing in people." The mention of his father hit Jake hard. He looked around at the festival grounds, seeing his dad's influence everywhere. From the classic car show area he'd always organized to the community spirit he'd helped foster. But something was still missing. "Wait here," he told Alexandra, then jogged toward the garage, his mind set on one specific task. When he returned a few minutes later, he was carrying his father's old toolbox, the one that had started his own journey as a mechanic. The crowd quieted as he approached Alexandra. "My dad had a tradition," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "Whenever someone new joined the garage, really joined it, he'd give them their first set of tools. Said it was important to start with quality instruments and build from there." He opened the toolbox, revealing a carefully curated collection of well-maintained tools. These were his teaching tools, the ones he used to show me everything I know about cars and about life. Alexandra's eyes widened as she understood the significance. "Jake, I can't." "Yes, you can," he said firmly. "Because you're not just some corporate partner. You're part of this garage now, part of this community, part of—" He took a deep breath. "Part of my life, if you want to be." The toolbox sat between them, representing far more than just wrenches and sockets. It was a bridge between their worlds, an offering of trust and a declaration of love, all wrapped into one. Alexandra reached out, running her fingers over the worn handles of the tools. "On one condition," she said, her voice carrying the same mix of strength and vulnerability that had characterized their entire journey. "What's that?" "That you let me show you my world too. Not the corporate facade or the boardroom battles, but the real work, the innovation, the chance to help communities, the opportunity to build something bigger than ourselves. Partners in everything." Jake's response was to close the distance between them, one hand still on his father's toolbox, the other finding its way to Alexandra's face. When their lips finally met, the town's cheers faded into background noise. This wasn't just a kiss. It was a promise, a beginning, a merger of 2 worlds that had only needed the right people to show how well they could fit together. The moment was broken by Sarah clearing her throat dramatically. "As touching as this is, we do have a festival to run. And correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't the garage's new training center need a proper inauguration?" The suggestion sparked immediate action. Bill Thompson began organizing the classic cars into an impromptu parade. Ruby and Mrs. Henderson set up a refreshment station near the garage. The local band, inspired by the occasion, started playing "Life is a Highway." Alexandra and Jake spent the next several hours giving informal tours of the garage, explaining their vision for its future. She handled the business aspects with practiced ease, while he demonstrated the hands-on training areas they planned to create. Together, they painted a picture of a future where corporate resources and small-town values worked in harmony. As the evening wound down, they found themselves back in the garage, sitting on the tailgate of Alexandra's truck, the vehicle that had brought them together through what now seemed like fate rather than chance. "You know," Jake said, "we never did finish our conversation from that night. Before everything came out." Alexandra leaned against him, both of them comfortable in the familiar surroundings of the garage. "Which part? The part where I was lying about who I was, or the part where we were falling in love?" "Both. Neither," he smiled. "The part about choices, and how one decision can change everything." Ah, that conversation. She picked up a wrench from the toolbox, turning it thoughtfully in her hands. "Looking back, I think we were both right. One decision did change everything, but not the one we thought. Oh, the real decision wasn't about staying or going, or even about telling the truth. It was about believing in something bigger than ourselves. You chose to believe in my vision, even after I'd given you every reason not to. I chose to believe in this place, these people, even when it meant risking everything I'd built." Jake watched her handle the tool with the same care he'd always used. "And now we build something new, something that honors your father's legacy and my father's dreams, something real." The garage's lights cast long shadows as night fell, but neither of them moved to leave. Outside, they could hear the festival continuing, the sounds of community and celebration drifting in. Inside, surrounded by the tools of Jake's trade and the promise of their shared future, they had found their own kind of perfect moment. "Partners?" Alexandra asked, holding out her hand in an echo of their first meeting. Jake took it, but instead of shaking it, he pulled her closer. "In everything," he confirmed, sealing the promise with another kiss. Above them, through the garage's windows, the festival lights twinkled like stars, casting their glow over a main street that now held not just memories of the past, but promises of the future. A future where heart and hustle, love and labor, corporate resources and community values could all work together, proving that sometimes the best partnerships are the ones that seem the least likely on paper, but make the most sense in reality. 6 months later, Miller's Auto Repair looked both exactly the same and completely different. The old sign remained, but it had been lovingly restored, its letters gleaming in the morning sun. Through the open bay doors, the sound of work and laughter mingled with country music from the radio. Inside, Alexandra, wearing her now customary overalls with the Morrison Technologies patch, was teaching a group of aspiring mechanics about proper diagnostic procedures. Her corporate polish hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had merged with a genuine hands-on expertise that made her lessons uniquely valuable. "Remember," she was saying, "every car tells a story. Your job isn't just to fix the engine, it's to understand what it's trying to tell you." Jake watched from his office, a space that now housed both his father's old desk and a modern computer system for the training program. On his wall, the collection of customer photos had grown, now including shots of their first graduating class of community mechanics. "Still can't believe you traded board meetings for brake pads," Sarah teased, dropping off the latest financial reports. The numbers were better than ever, but that wasn't what made Jake smile. "She didn't trade anything," he corrected, watching as Alexandra demonstrated a timing belt replacement. "She just found a way to make both worlds work together. Kind of. Like us." The garage had become more than just a local business. It was a model for Morrison Technologies' community initiative, proving that corporate resources and small-town values could create something greater than the sum of its parts. Other towns were already implementing similar programs, each adapted to their own community's needs. Ruby appeared with her usual coffee delivery, now a daily tradition for the expanded garage crew. "Your daddy would have loved this," she told Jake, All these young people learning the right way to do things, the honest way. Outside, Mrs. Henderson's grandson was helping clean tools, part of the garage's new youth apprenticeship program. Alexandra had insisted that any expansion maintain the personal touch that had made Miller's special in the first place. Speaking of doing things the right way, Jake said, pulling a small box from his desk drawer. Think it's time for this. Sarah's eyes widened as she recognized their grandmother's ring. Really? Now? Well, she did say she wanted to get her hands dirty in this business, Jake grinned. Might as well make it official. As he walked toward the workshop floor, Alexandra looked up from her lesson. Her smile, the one that still made his heart skip, grew wider as she saw him approaching. She knew him well enough now to read his expressions, to sense when something important was about to happen. Class dismissed, she said, turning back to her students. Remember what we learned today. Sometimes the most valuable repairs aren't the ones you make to the engine, but the ones you make to people's trust in you. The future stretched out before them like an open road, full of possibilities and promises. And in the end, that's what their story was really about. Not just fixing engines or saving businesses, but about how love, like the best repairs, requires both skill and heart, both trust and truth, to make something broken run beautifully again.